The words, "You're not woman enough," still echo in my mind like a death knell, even now as I sit behind this mahogany desk with his termination letter spread before me like a feast I've been starving for. 3 years? 3 years since Marcus Davidson looked me in the eye and delivered those words with the casual cruelty of someone swatting a fly. 3 years since my world collapsed. 3 years since I decided to rebuild it, brick by brick, degree by degree, promotion by promotion, until I could look down at him from the heights he never thought I could reach. But I'm getting ahead of myself. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the moment my heart shattered and my spine grew steel. It was a Tuesday morning in March when everything changed. I remember because I'd worn my favorite dress, the navy one with tiny white flowers that Marcus had once said brought out my eyes. God, how pathetic I was then. 26 years old, working as a junior marketing coordinator at Pinnacle Industries, and so desperately in love with a man who saw me as nothing more than a convenient placeholder. I'd been dating Marcus for 8 months. 8 months of thinking I'd found my person, my future, my happily ever after. He was the senior account manager, confident and charming, with this way of making me feel like the only woman in the room when he smiled at me. I thought we were building something real. I thought wrong. The morning started normally enough. I arrived at the office early, as I always did, stopping by the break room to make Marcus his coffee exactly how he liked it, black with 1 sugar, in his favorite mug. Such a small gesture, but it made me feel useful, needed. I was walking toward his office when I heard voices from the conference room. The door was slightly ajar, and I recognized Marcus's laugh immediately. That's when I heard her voice too. Sarah Chen, the new senior marketing director who'd started just 2 months ago. Beautiful, accomplished, Harvard MBA Sarah Chen. I should have kept walking. I should have delivered the coffee and gone back to my desk. Instead, I froze outside that door and listened to my world crumble. I don't know why you're still with her, Sarah was saying, her voice carrying that casual cruelty that comes so easily to some people. She's sweet, I suppose, but hardly management material. More like a secretary who wandered into the wrong department. I heard Marcus chuckle, and the sound felt like ice water in my veins. "She's convenient," he said, and those 2 words hit me harder than any physical blow ever could. Easy to be with, doesn't ask for much. But you're right, she's not exactly executive material. Hell, she's barely woman enough for what I need long term. There it was, the phrase that would replay in my mind for the next 3 years. Not woman enough. I stood there in the hallway, coffee growing cold in my hands, and felt something fundamental shift inside me. The hurt was immediate and overwhelming, but underneath it, something else was stirring. Something cold and sharp and hungry. "She's cute in that small-town way," Sarah continued, and I could hear the dismissal in her voice. "But you need someone who can match your ambition. Someone who can keep up with where you're going in this company." "Exactly," Marcus agreed. "She's fine for now, but I'm not looking at her and seeing CFO material, you know? I need a woman who can command respect, who has presence. Someone like me?" Sarah's voice was smooth, confident. "Like you." The silence that followed was deafening. I didn't need to see them to know what was happening. 8 months of believing I was loved, wanted, valued, and it was all a lie. I was convenient. I was easy. I was a placeholder until something better came along. My hands were shaking so badly I nearly dropped the coffee mug. That's when I realized I was still holding it, still standing there like some sort of broken statue. I needed to move, to get away, to process what I'd just heard. But my feet felt rooted to the spot. "What about the presentation next week?" Sarah asked, and I knew they were talking about the Morrison account, the one I'd been working on for months, the one Marcus had been taking credit for piece by piece. "I'll handle it," Marcus said. "She's done most of the groundwork anyway. I just need to polish it up, make it presentable. Make it presentable. As if my work wasn't already good enough. As if I wasn't good enough." The coffee mug slipped from my fingers and shattered on the floor, the sound echoing through the hallway like a gunshot. "What was that?" Sarah's voice was sharp. I didn't wait to find out if they'd investigate. I turned and ran, actually ran, down the hallway to the ladies' room, my heels clicking frantically against the polished floor. I locked myself in the last stall and let the tears come. But even as I sobbed, even as my heart broke into what felt like a million pieces, that cold, sharp thing inside me was growing. It whispered to me through the tears, through the humiliation, through the devastating realization that the man I loved saw me as nothing more than a stepping stone. "You'll show them," it whispered. "You'll show them all. I stayed in that bathroom stall for 20 minutes, crying quietly and letting the rage build. When I finally emerged, my eyes were red, but my resolve was crystallizing. I went back to my desk, cleaned up the broken coffee mug, and sat down at my computer. But instead of working on the Morrison account, I did something I'd never done before at work. I started researching MBA programs, executive leadership courses, professional development opportunities. I opened spreadsheets and began calculating costs, timelines, requirements. If Marcus thought I wasn't woman enough, if he thought I lacked ambition and presence, then I would become everything he said I wasn't. The irony wasn't lost on me. He'd given me the blueprint for my revenge without even realizing it. The rest of that day passed in a haze. I went through the motions of work, attended meetings, responded to emails, but every spare moment was spent planning. By the time 5 o'clock rolled around, I had a preliminary timeline mapped out. MBA program applications, executive coaching, networking events, professional wardrobe overhaul, everything I'd need to transform myself from the convenient girl he could discard into the kind of woman who commanded respect. Marcus stopped by my desk as I was packing up. He looked concerned, probably because I'd been unusually quiet all day. "Hey, everything okay?" he asked, leaning against my desk with that casual confidence that had once made my heart race. Now it just made me feel sick. I looked up at him, this man I'd thought I knew, this man I'd imagined a future with. He had no idea what I'd heard. No idea that his words had lit a fire that would ultimately consume him. "Just tired," I said, forcing a smile. "Long day?" He nodded, seemingly satisfied. "Want to grab dinner?" That new Italian place opened up downtown. The invitation felt like mockery. How many times had we done this? How many evenings had I spent across from him, hanging on his every word, while he saw me as nothing more than a temporary diversion? "I can't tonight," I said. "I have some things to take care of." "Everything all right?" There was genuine concern in his voice, or what I'd once mistaken for genuine concern. Now I wondered if it was just the worry of a man who might lose his convenient arrangement. "Everything's fine," I lied smoothly. "Just some personal stuff I need to handle." He accepted this without question, gave me a quick kiss on the forehead, God, how that gesture burned now, and left. I watched him walk away, probably heading straight to Sarah Chen's office, and felt that cold fire burn brighter. I drove home in a daze, my mind racing with possibilities and plans. My small apartment felt different somehow, as if I was seeing it through new eyes. The modest furniture, the simple decorations, the life I'd been content with just hours ago. It all felt like a costume I'd been wearing, playing a role I'd never questioned. That night, I sat at my kitchen table with my laptop and a cup of tea, and I began to build my new life. I researched MBA programs with the intensity of a general planning a campaign. Wharton, Harvard, Stanford, the names that carried weight, that commanded respect. I looked at admission requirements, application deadlines, GMAT prep courses. The most prestigious programs required 2 years of full-time study, which would mean leaving my job. But there were executive MBA programs designed for working professionals, part-time options that would let me advance my career while building toward my goal. Northwestern had a program that met on weekends. University of Chicago had evening classes. I could make this work. I spent hours that night creating a detailed timeline. GMAT prep starting immediately. Applications due in 6 months. If I was accepted, I'd start the program in 18 months. 2 years of intense study while working full-time, then emerge with the credentials Marcus claimed I lacked. But that wasn't enough. An MBA was just the beginning. I needed to understand the corporate game, needed to learn how to navigate the politics and power structures that I'd been oblivious to. I signed up for executive coaching sessions, leadership seminars, networking events. I researched the key players at Pinnacle Industries, studied their backgrounds, their career trajectories. Most importantly, I began to study Marcus himself, his strengths, his weaknesses, his blind spots. If I was going to surpass him, I needed to understand exactly what I was up against. The next few weeks were a blur of secret preparation. I took the GMAT prep course online during my lunch breaks. I attended networking events in the evenings, telling Marcus I was having girls' nights or family dinners. I began to cultivate relationships with people I'd previously overlooked, senior executives, board members, influential clients. The hardest part was pretending everything was normal with Marcus. We still went to dinner, still spent weekends together, still maintained the facade of a happy couple, but every kiss felt like betrayal, every "I love you" like a lie. I found myself analyzing his behavior, looking for signs of his true feelings, evidence of whatever was developing between him and Sarah. I didn't have to look long. 2 weeks after overhearing their conversation, I arrived at work early and saw them leaving the building together. They were walking close, too close for colleagues, and when Sarah laughed at something Marcus said, she put her hand on his arm in a way that made my stomach clench. I watched from my car as they got into Marcus's BMW and drove away together. Business breakfast, I told myself. Just business. But I knew better. The cold fire inside me burned brighter. That morning, I made a decision that would change everything. I wasn't just going to improve myself, I was going to become indispensable. I was going to make myself so valuable to Pinnacle Industries that they couldn't imagine functioning without me. And then, when I had the power and position I needed, I would destroy Marcus Davidson's career the same way he'd destroyed my heart. I started with the Morrison account, the one I'd been working on for months while Marcus took credit. I had copies of all my research, all my strategy documents, all my preliminary presentations. That morning, I compiled everything into a comprehensive report and sent it directly to James Morrison himself, along with a note explaining my role in developing the proposal. It was a risky move. If Marcus found out, it could cost me my job. But I was beyond caring about playing it safe. I was done being convenient. The response came faster than I'd expected. Morrison's assistant called that afternoon to schedule a meeting, not with Marcus, but with me. Apparently, Morrison was impressed with my work and wanted to discuss the account directly. I met with Morrison that Friday. He was a stern man in his 60s, the kind of old-school businessman who valued competence above all else. He'd built his company from nothing and had little patience for corporate politics or games. "I've been working with your company for 5 years," he told me, "and this is the first time I've seen research this thorough. Most of what Marcus has presented to me over the years has been surface-level nonsense. Your analysis actually shows understanding of my business." I felt a thrill of vindication. "Thank you, Mr. Morrison. I've spent a lot of time studying your company's needs." "I can see that. The question is, why hasn't Marcus been presenting this level of work himself?" This was my moment. I could have thrown Marcus under the bus, could have told Morrison the truth about who'd been doing the real work. Instead, I chose a different path. "I think Marcus has been focused on the bigger picture," I said carefully. "I've been handling the detailed research and analysis. We make a good team." Morrison studied me for a long moment. "I'm not interested in teams, Miss Rodriguez. I'm interested in results. And from what I can see, you're the one delivering them." He paused, then leaned back in his chair. "I'm thinking about bringing my account in-house, hiring someone to manage it directly. Someone who actually understands my business. Would you be interested?" The offer was tempting, a chance to escape Pinnacle Industries, to start fresh somewhere else. But that would mean abandoning my larger plan. I needed to stay here, needed to climb the ladder from within. "I appreciate the offer, Mr. Morrison, but I'm committed to Pinnacle Industries. I believe we can provide you with the level of service you deserve." "We'll see about that," he said. "But I'll tell you this. From now on, I want to work directly with you. Not Marcus, not anyone else. You." It was a victory, but a dangerous one. When Marcus found out, he was furious. He cornered me in the supply room that afternoon, his face red with anger. "What the hell did you think you were doing?" he demanded. "Morrison is my account. Mine. You had no right to contact him directly." I looked at him calmly, feeling strangely detached from his anger. "I was presenting my research. The research I've been doing for months while you've been busy with other things." "Other things? What's that supposed to mean?" I shrugged. "Nothing. Just that you've seemed distracted lately." He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see the wheels turning. Was he wondering if I knew about Sarah? Did he suspect I'd overheard their conversation? "The Morrison account is my responsibility," he said finally. "You work for me, not the other way around. Don't forget that." "I haven't forgotten anything," I replied, and there was something in my tone that made him step back slightly. That night, I celebrated my small victory with a bottle of wine and another planning session. Morrison's direct interest in my work was a significant step forward, but it was just the beginning. I needed to become visible to more senior executives, needed to prove my value beyond a single account. I started volunteering for high-visibility projects, often working late into the night to deliver exceptional results. I joined the company's charity committee, organized team-building events, and made myself indispensable to anyone who would let me. Most importantly, I began to cultivate a relationship with Patricia Williams, the VP of Marketing and Marcus's direct supervisor. Patricia was a formidable woman in her 50s who'd climbed the corporate ladder through sheer competence and strategic thinking. She was exactly the kind of woman Marcus had claimed I wasn't: powerful, respected, commanding. I studied her like a master class in executive presence. It took weeks of careful maneuvering, but I finally managed to secure a coffee meeting with Patricia. I presented it as a chance to discuss my professional development, but I had a much more specific agenda. I've been thinking about pursuing an MBA. I told her over lattes at the cafe down the street from our office. I want to understand the business at a deeper level. Patricia nodded approvingly. That's smart. Too many people think they can advance without the proper foundation. What programs are you considering? I outlined my research, my timeline, my plans for balancing work and study. Patricia listened intently, occasionally asking sharp questions that demonstrated just how thoroughly she understood the corporate game. You know, she said finally, we have a tuition reimbursement program. If you're accepted to one of the top-tier schools, the company will cover a significant portion of your costs. This was news to me. Really? I hadn't heard about that. It's not widely advertised. We only offer it to employees we see as having significant potential for advancement. She studied me over her coffee cup. I think you might qualify. The approval felt like a drug. Here was a senior executive, someone Marcus looked up to and tried to impress, telling me I had potential. Me, the girl who wasn't woman enough. I'd be very interested in learning more about that, I said. I'll send you the information. But understand, if the company invests in your education, we'll expect a return on that investment. You'll be on a different track with different expectations. I understand. Good. Because I've been watching your work, particularly on the Morrison account. You have strategic thinking abilities that aren't being fully utilized in your current role. Patricia's words stayed with me for days. I was on the right track, but I needed to accelerate my timeline. The MBA program was still months away, but I couldn't wait that long to start advancing. I needed to find ways to demonstrate my value now, to position myself as indispensable. That's when I discovered Marcus's weakness. He was lazy. For all his charm and confidence, he coasted on his relationships and took credit for other people's work. He'd been doing it for years, but no one had called him on it because the results were good enough. But good enough wasn't going to cut it anymore. I began to document everything. Every project I worked on, every strategy I developed, every client relationship I built. I created a detailed portfolio of my contributions, complete with before and after analyses showing the impact of my work. It was tedious, methodical work, but it was building an unshakable case for my value to the company. Meanwhile, Marcus's relationship with Sarah was becoming increasingly obvious. They thought they were being discreet, but I could see the signs, the lingering glances, the private conversations, the way they always seemed to find excuses to work together. It was almost laughable how predictable it all was. The breaking point came 3 months after I'd overheard their conversation. I was working late on a presentation for a major client when I heard voices from the conference room, the same conference room where my old life had died. I couldn't resist taking a look. This time the door was closed, but the blinds were partially open. I could see Marcus and Sarah inside, and it was clear they weren't discussing business. They were kissing, her hands in his hair, his arms around her waist. 8 months of what I'd thought was love, reduced to nothing more than a temporary convenience. I watched for exactly 30 seconds, just long enough to burn the image into my memory. Then I walked back to my desk, opened my laptop, and began to type. My resignation letter was brief and professional. I thanked the company for the opportunities I'd been given and stated that I would be leaving to pursue my MBA full-time. I printed it out, signed it, and placed it in my desk drawer. But I didn't submit it. Not yet. I had one more move to make. The next morning, I requested a meeting with Patricia Williams. I told her I had some concerns about the Morrison account that I thought she should be aware of. We met that afternoon in her office, and I presented my case with the cold precision of a prosecutor. I showed her the documentation of my work on the Morrison account, the client's specific feedback about wanting to work with me directly, and the pattern of credit being taken for my research and analysis. I was careful not to make it personal, not to mention what I'd overheard or what I'd seen the night before. I simply presented the facts and let Patricia draw her own conclusions. "This is concerning," she said, reviewing the documents I'd prepared. "I wasn't aware that you were doing this level of work on Marcus's accounts. I don't think Marcus realized how much of an interest Mr. Morrison had taken in the detailed analysis," I said carefully. "He's been focused on the relationship management side of things. Patricia's expression was unreadable. I see. And you've been handling the strategic development? Yes, ma'am. I've found it very rewarding work. She nodded slowly. I think we need to have a conversation about your role here. It seems like your current position might not be making the best use of your abilities. That conversation led to another and another. Within 2 weeks, I had been promoted to senior marketing specialist with a raise and expanded responsibilities. More importantly, I was now Patricia's direct report, effectively bypassing Marcus in the chain of command. The announcement was made at the monthly all-hands meeting. I watched Marcus's face as Patricia explained the new organizational structure, saw the moment he realized what had happened. His eyes found mine across the conference room, and I saw something there I'd never seen before: fear. After the meeting, he cornered me in the hallway. "Congratulations," he said, but there was no warmth in his voice. "I had no idea you were looking for a promotion." "I wasn't looking for anything," I replied truthfully. "I was just doing my job. Your job was to support me, to be part of my team." The possessiveness in his voice was almost funny. I thought my job was to serve the company's interests. "Don't play games with me, Elena. What's this really about?" For a moment, I considered telling him. Considered explaining exactly what I'd heard that morning 3 months ago, how his words had changed everything. But that would give him power, would let him know that his opinion had mattered enough to hurt me. Instead, I smiled. "I'm not playing games, Marcus. I'm advancing my career. Isn't that what you'd want for me?" He stared at me for a long moment, and I could see him trying to reconcile this new version of me with the convenient, unambitious girl he thought he knew. "We need to talk," he said finally. "About us. About what this means for our relationship." "What about it? You're my girlfriend. Doesn't that create some sort of conflict of interest?" I almost laughed. After months of watching him with Sarah, after knowing I was nothing more than a placeholder, he was worried about conflicts of interest? "I don't see why it would," I said. "We're both professionals. We can separate our personal and professional lives." That night, he took me to dinner at an expensive restaurant downtown. He was trying to be charming, trying to reclaim whatever dynamic he thought he'd lost. But I could see the calculation behind his smile, the way he was reassessing our relationship in light of my new position. "I'm proud of you," he said over dessert, reaching across the table to take my hand. "I always knew you had potential." The lie came so easily to him. 3 months ago, I'd been barely woman enough. Now, suddenly, he'd always seen my potential. "Thank you," I said, not pulling my hand away. "That means a lot." "I think this could be really good for us," he continued. "Two ambitious people building their careers together. We could be a real power couple. A power couple." The phrase made my skin crawl. He was already repositioning himself, trying to figure out how to benefit from my advancement. But I played along, smiled and nodded, and let him think his charm was working. The next few weeks were a delicate dance. I threw myself into my new role, working closely with Patricia to develop new strategies and initiatives. I was finally doing the kind of work I'd always dreamed of: strategic planning, client relationship management, team leadership. And I was good at it. Better than good. Meanwhile, Marcus was struggling. Without my behind-the-scenes support, his performance was slipping. Projects were delivered late, client presentations lacked depth, and Patricia was starting to notice. I watched his confidence erode day by day, saw the way he scrambled to compensate for abilities he'd never actually developed. The Morrison account was particularly telling. Without my research and analysis, Marcus's presentations became superficial and generic. Morrison called Patricia directly to complain about the declining quality of service. I thought we'd agreed that Elena would be handling the strategic work on my account. He told her during a conference call I was invited to join. "Of course, Mr. Morrison," Patricia replied smoothly. "Elena is now in a position to take on more responsibility for your account. Marcus will continue to handle the relationship management side." I could see Marcus's jaw tighten. In corporate speak, Patricia had just demoted him from account lead to account support. He was now working for me, at least where Morrison was concerned. But the real test came when Patricia announced that she wanted to restructure the entire marketing department. The company was expanding, and she needed someone to head up the new strategic accounts division. It was a senior management position, a significant step up from where I'd been just months earlier. "I've been watching how you've handled the Morrison account," she told me during a private meeting. "You have the kind of strategic thinking we need for this role, but it would mean managing a team, including some people who have been here longer than you, including Marcus." She didn't say it, but we both knew what she meant. "I'm interested," I said. I think I'm ready for that kind of responsibility. There would be some challenges. Not everyone would be happy about the promotion. Some might see it as too much too fast. I understand, but I'm confident in my abilities. Patricia studied me for a long moment. You've changed since you started here. You're more focused, more strategic in your thinking. If only she knew. 3 months of careful planning, of transforming hurt into ambition, of rebuilding myself from the ground up. I was more focused because I had a target. I was more strategic because I had a plan. I've learned a lot in the past few months, I said. I feel like I'm finally understanding what I'm capable of. Good. Because if you take this position, you'll need to make some difficult decisions. Not everyone on your team will be performing at the level we need. The implication was clear. As head of strategic accounts, I would have the authority to hire and fire. I would have the power to reshape the department according to my vision. I would have the power to remove people who weren't contributing to the team's success. People like Marcus. I understand, I said. I'm prepared to make whatever decisions are necessary for the success of the department. The promotion was announced 2 weeks later. 6 months after overhearing Marcus's devastating assessment of my worth, I was now a department head. I had my own office, my own team, and most importantly, I had authority over the man who'd broken my heart. The first team meeting was surreal. I stood at the head of the conference table, the same table where Marcus had once dismissed me as convenient, and looked out at the faces of my new subordinates. Marcus sat in the middle, his expression carefully neutral, but I could see the tension in his shoulders. I want to start by saying how excited I am to be working with all of you, I began. This department has enormous potential, and I know we can achieve great things together. But that's going to require everyone to step up their game. I outlined my vision for the department, my expectations for performance, and my plans for the coming quarter. I made it clear that mediocrity wouldn't be tolerated, that everyone would need to prove their value through results. I'll be meeting with each of you individually over the next week to discuss your role and performance goals, I continued. I want to understand your strengths, identify areas for improvement, and make sure we're all aligned on expectations. Marcus's meeting was scheduled for Friday afternoon. I'd deliberately saved it for last, wanting to see how he'd react to a week of uncertainty. When he knocked on my office door, I was reviewing his performance file. The pattern was clear: good relationship management skills, but increasingly dependent on others for strategic thinking and analysis. "Come in," I called, not looking up from the file. He entered and sat down across from my desk. The power dynamic was immediately apparent. I was behind the desk, in control, while he was in the supplicant's chair. 3 months ago, he'd been the one in charge, the one making decisions about my worth. Now the tables had turned. "So," I said, finally looking up at him, "how are you feeling about the new structure?" "It's an adjustment," he said carefully. "But I'm looking forward to working with you in this new capacity." "Good. Because I'm going to need everyone on this team to perform at their highest level. No exceptions." I opened his file and began to review his recent performance. The Morrison account issues, the missed deadlines, the declining client satisfaction scores. I read each item aloud, my voice matter-of-fact and professional. "I'm particularly concerned about the Morrison account," I said. "Client satisfaction has dropped significantly over the past few months. Can you explain what's been happening there?" Marcus shifted uncomfortably. "It's been a challenging account. Morrison has very specific requirements, and he's been difficult to please." "Interesting. Because when I worked on the account, his satisfaction scores were quite high. What changed?" The question hung in the air between us. We both knew what had changed. I was no longer doing the work while he took the credit. "I think there might have been some miscommunication about roles and responsibilities," he said finally. "I see. And how do you think we should address that going forward?" "I'm open to whatever you think is best." There was something almost pitiful about his submission. This was the man who'd once spoken about me with such casual dismissal, who'd reduced me to a convenient placeholder. Now he was asking me what I thought was best. "I think we need to restructure your responsibilities," I said. "Focus on what you do well and make sure you have the support you need for the strategic elements." "That sounds reasonable." "Good. Because I'm going to be implementing some changes over the next few weeks. Performance standards are going to be higher, and I'll be monitoring everyone's progress closely." I let that sink in before continuing. "I want to be clear about something, Marcus. Our personal relationship doesn't give you any special treatment here. If anything, I'm going to hold you to an even higher standard because I know what you're capable of." It was a lie, of course. I didn't know what he was capable of because I'd been doing most of his work for months. But he didn't need to know that. "I understand. he said. I wouldn't expect anything else. After he left, I sat in my office and allowed myself a moment of satisfaction. The girl who wasn't woman enough was now his boss. The convenient placeholder was now making decisions about his career. It was a victory, but it was only the beginning. Over the next few weeks, I implemented a series of changes designed to expose the weaknesses in Marcus's performance. I introduced detailed reporting requirements, regular client check-ins, and performance metrics that couldn't be fudged or delegated. I also began to distance myself from him personally, claiming that our professional relationship made it inappropriate to continue dating. I think it's best if we keep things professional, I told him over dinner one evening. I can't show favoritism, and I can't risk our relationship affecting my judgment. He protested, of course, tried to convince me that we could make it work, that our love was stronger than corporate politics. But I was unmoved. The man who'd once dismissed me as not woman enough was now pleading for my attention. I love you, Elena, he said, and for a moment I almost believed he meant it. Don't let this job change what we have. It's not changing anything, I replied. I'm just finally seeing things clearly. The breakup was inevitable. Within a month of my promotion, I ended our relationship citing professional obligations and personal growth. Marcus was devastated, but I felt nothing but relief. I was finally free of the pretense, free to focus entirely on my plan. The performance reviews came 6 months later. I'd spent those months documenting everything, every missed deadline, every client complaint, every instance of subpar work. Marcus's review was a litany of failures and disappointments. His performance ratings were the lowest in the department. I'm placing you on a performance improvement plan, I told him during our review meeting. You have 90 days to show significant improvement, or we'll need to discuss other options. Other options? Termination, Marcus. You're not meeting the standards we need for this position. The irony was perfect. The man who'd once judged me as not good enough for his future was now being told he wasn't good enough for mine. He tried to fight it, of course. Went to HR, complained to Patricia, even attempted to document what he called my personal vendetta against him. But I'd been too careful, too thorough. Every decision I'd made was supported by documentation, by objective performance metrics, by client feedback. Elena has implemented some of the most effective performance management systems we've seen. Patricia told me during one of our regular check-ins. The department's overall performance has improved significantly under her leadership. It was true. While Marcus struggled, the rest of the team was thriving. I'd identified their strengths, supported their development, and created an environment where excellence was rewarded. The only weak link was Marcus himself. The 90 days passed quickly. Marcus made some effort to improve, but it was too little, too late. Years of coasting on other people's work had left him unprepared for the demands of actual performance. When the review period ended, there was only one possible outcome. I'm sorry, Marcus. I said, not sorry at all. But your performance hasn't improved to the level we need. I'm going to have to let you go. He sat across from my desk, the same desk where he'd once questioned my qualifications, and I watched his world crumble the way mine had a year earlier. The difference was that his destruction was entirely deserved. You can't do this, he said, his voice hollow. This is personal. You're doing this because of our breakup. This is purely professional, I replied, my voice steady. Your performance has been consistently below standards. I have documentation going back months. I know what this is really about. You're angry because Because you what? I interrupted. Because you told Sarah Chen that I wasn't woman enough? Because you called me convenient? Because you said I was barely management material? The color drained from his face. He'd forgotten about that conversation, or assumed I'd never heard it. But I'd carried those words with me for a year, let them fuel my transformation into exactly the kind of woman he'd claimed I wasn't. You heard that, he said weakly. I heard every word. And you know what? You were right. I wasn't woman enough for you. I was too small, too accommodating, too willing to let you take credit for my work. But I fixed that, didn't I? I stood up and walked around the desk, enjoying the way he seemed to shrink in his chair. You said I lacked ambition, that I wasn't executive material. Well, here I am, executive material enough to fire you. You said I wasn't the kind of woman who could command respect. But here you are in my office, subject to my decisions. Elena, You said I was convenient, easy to be with. Well, I'm not convenient anymore, am I? I'm not easy. I'm not the girl you can dismiss and discard when something better comes along. I returned to my chair and picked up his termination letter, already signed and processed. You created me, Marcus. Every word you said that morning, every casual dismissal, every moment you made me feel small, it all went into building the woman sitting across from you now. So in a way, I should thank you. I never meant. You meant every word, and so do I. I slid the termination letter across the desk. Clean out your desk. Security will escort you out. He sat there for a long moment, staring at the letter, and I could see him processing the magnitude of what had just happened. The convenient girl had become his boss. The woman who wasn't woman enough had become woman enough to destroy his career. I'm sorry, he said finally, for what I said, for how I treated you. I know it doesn't change anything, but I'm sorry. You're right, I replied. It doesn't change anything. After he left, I sat in my office and let the victory wash over me. It had taken a year of careful planning, of transforming myself from the inside out, but I'd done it. I'd proven that I was more than woman enough. I was woman enough to build something he could never achieve, to reach heights he'd never imagined. The MBA program I'd applied to had accepted me. Patricia had agreed to let me continue in my role while pursuing my degree part-time. I had a team that respected me, clients who valued my work, and a future that was entirely my own creation. 6 months later, I received a LinkedIn message from Marcus. He'd found a new job at a smaller company, a significant step down from where he'd been. He wanted to congratulate me on my continued success, to express his admiration for what I'd accomplished. I read the message once and deleted it without responding. I didn't need his admiration or his congratulations. I didn't need his validation or his apologies. I had everything I needed, the knowledge that I'd taken his worst assessment of who I was and transformed it into the blueprint for who I became. The woman who wasn't woman enough had become more woman than he'd ever deserved. Sitting in my office today, 3 years after that devastating morning, I can honestly say that Marcus Davidson gave me the greatest gift of my life. He showed me exactly who I didn't want to be, and in doing so, he showed me exactly who I could become. I'm not the same person who stood in that hallway with a cup of coffee growing cold in her trembling hands. I'm not the girl who believed that love meant making yourself small, convenient, easy. I'm not the woman who needed a man's approval to feel worthy. I am the woman who commands respect because I've earned it. I am the woman who has built something meaningful through strategic thinking and relentless execution. I am the woman who learned that the best revenge isn't just living well, it's living so well that you become everything your enemies said you couldn't be. The words "not woman enough" still echo in my mind sometimes, but now they make me smile. Because I proved them wrong in the most satisfying way possible. I became his boss, and I fired him for being exactly the kind of person he'd accused me of being. Not good enough, not strategic enough, not strong enough. In the end, he was right about one thing. I wasn't woman enough for him. I was woman enough for so much more.